Well, I hope that's coming through because, as usual, the Twitch sort of live preview is just not working at all. It says all of my stats and vital signs are excellent, but there's just nothing visible on the screen. So hopefully you're there. If not, then I'm just going to be talking to an empty room. Very good. Okay, anyway, yes. Hello. We are up to CodeZone, One Uncoder CodeZone. Episode 69. I'm going to leave that there for people to chip in, I suppose. And today we're looking at something rather infuriating. I found a bug. So tonight is going to involve squashing that bug because it is quite an irritating one. Then I'll show some new features. If we don't manage to squash the bug, it's okay. It doesn't stop us from actually enjoying ourselves. But it will be nice to fix it because I think maybe I've got a fundamental misunderstanding of something about how Sol works. And I'm hoping it's more dumb than that. I'm hoping it's just me making a real mess of things. But it seems to be the following problem. Let's just make sure that somebody is actually watching. If you can, somebody shout out in the chat if you can hear this. It's always a bit worrying when I can't see the preview because I don't know if anything's working at all. Right. Possibly Speedy. Hello. Thank you, Siggy. Yes. Good. Thank you, Standard In. Yeah. Good old reliable Standard In there. Right. So what is this bug? Well, first of all, I'll show you a couple of features that I added to the Polygon sort of editor. Remember, we've built this sort of test setup. It's a self-contained thing that exists written in the Pixel game engine, but it allows me to just test some simple features. And not much has changed in terms of functionality, except now I can draw a shape, which we've been able to do, and you'll see some mysterious 2s. This is my attempt at trying to debug things. And if I select the shape, I can then go back and move. Well, see, I can't, right? So that's part of the problem number one. I can then sometimes select these corners and re-engineer the shape. Now, let's say I put in a new shape, and I select this one. See, it's nice when it hovers, right? I quite like the glowing hover thing. And if I press the M key to move the vertex, fine, it's working just fine. It's like I can independently edit the shapes. But if I go back to this one and select it and press the M key, I get a whole load of garbage appearing. And it's Lua garbage. It says construct rectangle, the function, Lua, line 15 in the Lua file. Attempt to index a nil value. So let's go and have a look at what this nil value is. Let's close that down. And if I go over to construct rectangle, nil value, line 15. Well, the only thing that usually gives you a nil value is when you attempt to index something in Lua that doesn't exist. Johnny G, you're late. We started 3 minutes ago. So that people watching from afar won't understand that. Now, as you can see, the only thing that can be indexed here that might not exist is this node variable. Those that might not remember, node was something we set up previously. We'll have a look at that in a minute. And indeed, it has no size. It's as if Sol forgets what node is. Now, I'm sure it doesn't. I'm sure it's me making the mistake somewhere. But what seems to be happening, sometimes I'm crashing here as well. So it's as if it's almost losing the linkage between Lua and C++. Now let's have a look at what's going on. So now with a bit of context, I can run the same, at least I can recreate the bug. I can draw one rectangle, and remember I'm outputting this 2. That's the size of the number of nodes in the shape. And I'll draw this second rectangle, and when I go to select this first one and then position a node, we can see we get all these intermittent zeros. That's in between the error message. It's as if the size of that node object has completely collapsed. It's disappeared. It's got to be me making this mistake. I'm putting too much faith in the Sol library to hold my hand here, so I'm hoping it's a me error. I'm fairly certain it is. But I can't find anywhere in the code where I would naturally be affecting this. So let's have a look. When we move a node, we call this update polygon function. Let's go and have a look there first. The update polygon function is a member function of the class which represents the shape. Now recall that the shapes are just a collection of control points, and at all times when we want to turn that into geometry we run a Lua script, and for each shape there is a unique Lua state machine set up. It's a bit overkill, but hey, I've got lots of RAM. I'm okay with that. So when this update polygon function gets called for that shape, it should be working on local data. In fact, here we go. This is where we set up our Lua state machine for this shape with sort of references to the vector objects of nodes. So this is just a vector of the 2D coordinate types. And I passed it in, and that's been working fine for constructing the shapes. In fact, it works for quite complicated shapes. I'll give you a little bit of a sneaky preview. So one of the shapes I've been working on is a more intelligent line. So we draw a line like this. You can see how it curves around without sort of duplicating its geometry. We'll have a nice look at that in a minute. We can draw all sorts of interesting shapes as long as the line remains valid and it adds radiuses to the end of the line. So let's put that there, and I'll join those up. And if I zoom in, you can start to see the shapes. So I'm fairly confident the approach we've got is working quite well. And it's also this is the interesting, perhaps the sort of analysis vector we need to look at. If I now select this shape, which was the last shape drawn, and move some of its vertices, it works just fine. A little bit flickery perhaps, but it does actually work no problem at all. Pick this one. And you can see the geometry is adapting according to what's necessary. And so I pull this one down here, turn that into 2 straight sections, and we'll zoom in a bit. Change this. You can see it actually generates triangles as necessary to handle that curvature on the outside edge of the shape. It's interesting algorithm this. I might make a separate video about just doing this, because for me it was an entertaining exercise to try and do it without getting any overdraw at all. So that's the challenge, because if you draw stuff with a little bit of alpha and you've got overdraw, then you start to notice it very quick. In fact, it starts to look sort of like that. Now, this is a known limitation of my approach at the moment, but you can see if it had overdraw, you get sort of these bright sections because it's additively blending. So I'm quite happy that Lua is doing what it needs to be doing and that my control points are doing what they should be doing. But if I draw another shape, we seem to lose the original shape's set of nodes, but only from Lua. Because if I draw now, this may or may not work. It's all unknown. I've drawn another shape and I go back to my original one. I can click on it and I can see the nodes. So the nodes haven't been lost. Oh, frightened me to death then. Let me just turn that down, down a little bit. Thank you, AJ Squirrel. That's much appreciated. I should have a look at the chat. We've not said hello to people yet, have we? Let's have a look. Who have we got? We've got Bixie, hello. Standardint, hello. Dragoneye, Speedy's here. Siggy's here. Josh, Undefined Drunk, Time Lord. Johnny G, of course, was late. Sarbass47, Dr. Lokes, Sneaky Wednesday stream. Yeah, it doesn't quite always go to my schedule. So I've been to the dentist today, so I've got a bit of a sore mouth. Magetsup, hello. Susan the Destroyer, Type T. Hello there. Kieran, morning. Kieran, are you back to normal yet? Are you kind of like, de-jet lagged? Kenalax 99. Ken Alex 99. Hello. Code Livian. Few caught up with the bendy straws. Yeah, that's what everybody thinks. Right? They do look a bit like bendy straws. And I was talking to Slice and Dice on the Discord server. Well, I'm demonstrating this now as a point and won't move. But you could hear, my brain can hear the crinkling and the popping of the straws. What I wanted to demonstrate anyways, the nodes are still there. And look, I can move these around rather oddly. So I've put the node up there. And it's not updated the geometry. So my nodes have somehow become disconnected from the Lua space. And that's a bit worrying, because it's something I don't quite understand. If I go back to this one, which is the most recent shape, works no problem at all. So it seems to retain the linkage for the most recent shape, but loses it or just gets confused altogether with previous shapes. And I'm worried then that actually is my massive collection of Lua state machines not actually a collection of Lua state machines? Is Sol doing something sneaky in the background and it's really just one big Lua state machine, in which case we may have to rethink for a few things. You can taste the milkshake. yeah, Josh. You can hear it as it crinkles. It's a shame now that they're like the world's most formidable evil product, and nobody ever can use them. Yeah, maybe it's allocated. See, I thought the same thing, Mugetsu. So my first sort of approach was, well, oh, excuse me. My first approach. That's not my normal cough, by the way. I think I've just inhaled a fly. It's going well, isn't it? My first approach was to just simply reinforce this by taking that there and sticking it in the update polygon function straight away. So at least it's always linking to the C++ nodes vector, if as necessary. It seems like stale references. Yeah, this is what I'm a bit worried about. Because that's I have to take a little bit of a sort of a design detour then. It's not my normal cough. Yeah. The dentist fixed my cough. No, not quite. I'm having. I've got quite a. I've been sidetrack. Yes, I'm British. Therefore, I know. Yes, the internet says I have the worst teeth in the world. Actually, I don't. I have pretty good teeth, and I've always had good teeth. In fact, I've had very, very little work done to them, and very little need to have any work done to them for some time. But as I'm getting older, one of them isn't that good. And it needs a crown putting on the top to stop it getting worse. And so I'm in the middle of having a crown installed. So the gory details of putting a crown on is they chisel away basically the circumference of the tooth. And then they take lots of mouldings of it, and maybe put a little pin in there as well, and then they go away and make the crown, and next week I have the luxury of having the crown sort of cemented over the top of that that chiselled area. And in all being well, what it does is it stops the forces from causing the tooth to shatter. Any of the viewers that are still here, I do apologise, but yes, I'm trying to stop my my tooth from shattering. On the recommendation of my dentist. And so what she says, she knows more about teeth than I do, that's for sure. However, during this process, because they've had to sort of do all the chiseling, and that's what they did sort of today, they've had to they took all the mouldings, and they can't put a normal filling back on now, so they've put this temporary filling on, and it's like a big blob of rubber that's sat on the side of my tooth. So apologies if I'm a little bit sort of sideways speaking at the moment. Yeah, I will say it's been utterly painless. The equipment that my dentist uses is sort of, well, he who owns the dentist is a bit of an enthusiast. So he has like a room filled with ancient dental equipment because he collects it, but he also likes to collect all the really modern stuff as well. So he's got things like lasers and stuff to set teeth. I understood that you guys have bad teeth due to the excessive amount of sugar. This is not an insulting stream at all, is it? Possibly. Put a cigar on that side. I don't think that would be an appropriate Twitch stream for me. Anyway, enough about my teeth. That's why I might be a little bit sort of today. So I tried to sort of force this into place. It makes no difference. So has it lost some reference? Whatever, it's gone. It's fine. I don't know why it would have stale references though, but I do worry it is something like that. See, Lua could be doing some sort of crazy magic behind the scenes here. Sorry, Sol could be doing some crazy magic behind the scenes. And so let's try running some stuff through the debugger and see what happens. So if I actually run to, where's the easiest place to do this? The easiest place to actually sort of trigger this is when I'm selecting the shape and moving it around. So here. So this is the line that calls the problematic function. It sets the selected node of the selected shape to the current location of the cursor. I can only have one selected node at the moment. That's done through just a little bit of a proximity check between the currently selected shape's nodes. Yeah, I think that's simple enough. So if we trigger run to a bit of a breakpoint here. Yeah, see, I wonder, is it giving it some sort of... Does Sol work by naming it in some clever way? And because I've got duplicate machines, basically all of the same object, that it's just got confused. What am I doing? Right, so let's draw a first rectangle. There we go. Let's draw a second rectangle. And so now I'm going to move a node. So I press the M key. Yoink. And we get to this line of code here. So the selected shape is shape 0. That was the first shape that we drew. And the selected node is node 1. There were 2 nodes on that rectangle, and the bottom right one is the one. So it's the right shape, and it's the right node. And the node's vector is... Well, it's fine. It's there. It exists. Doesn't seem to have any problems. It's just a vector of 2D coordinates. So, okay. Now, let's run update polygon. So I'll jump into that one. Here's my nodes vector. So it's fine. Look, see? Same one. I set that in Lua. Doesn't seem to be a problem. I then find my function in Lua. I call it. This current construction node argument doesn't make a difference now. We've now finished the construction. We're just moving things around. But the result, look at this. Right? It's actually C++ that crashes out. Well, it doesn't quite crash out. It gets caught as an exception. So it's an opportunity here to look what's going on. So let's have a look at the call stack and see where it got to. So here's my update function being called. It then did a load of stuff in Sol. I know this is difficult to see on the stream. I do apologize for that. But then it starts to crash with vector. It's basically, I've tried to push back. So the line I've highlighted here, it does say push back. If I bring that into... Let's put the call stack. I'll put it there. I know that doesn't make it more visible. I don't think I can sort of dynamically zoom on these. So when I tried to push back to the vector from Lua, it failed. You're right? The vector it's just not there. That link hasn't occurred. So I'm a bit stuck. This looks like all the stuff that Sol. Yeah, Sol adds all of this container wizardry to the back, but it seems to have completely lost track of what vector I'm trying to use. Now, if that's the case, if that's my misunderstanding of how Sol should handle this scenario, then I need to go away and rethink how I'm constructing my geometry here. So hang on, have a look. Thank you, Speedy. Do you have the same name on this global in 2 Lua state machines? Yeah, you see, that's what I'm saying. But it's 2 Lua, they should be completely... I doubt it's a bug in Sol. The two should be 2 completely exclusive state machines. You should have no crossover between them at all, unless Sol is doing some clever wizardry in the background, and it gives the impression that it's doing lots of different Lua state machines, and actually it doesn't. So yeah, I've been tearing my hair out a little bit over this one, sort of last night and before coming online tonight, because it's a bit of a showstopper in terms of what my plan was. Hang on. So standard, can you jump into the vector code where it crashes? Yeah. Well, I think this is not that exciting. This bit, right? No, let's try and we can move the call stack back now. You couldn't see it. It didn't actually improve anything, but I'll move it back down here, just so I know where it is. Right, so what have we got? We've got exception thrown, read access violation, right? Which makes sense if there's literally nothing there to interact with. Zoom out a little bit so we have a few more things. So it's exchange. I don't know why it would call specifically exchange. Let's back up a little bit. So let's go in. Let's have a look at what Sol actually does. Try and follow it through. So Sol called whatever this was with some arguments. Let's see if we can get these arguments. We can't get any arguments. No, okay, whatever that was went to there, then it went to here. Let's have a look. Nothing. So there's our Lewis state. I wonder if that's like, yeah, that should be unique, right? And push, right? So whatever the base type was, it wraps up all of the containers. So I'm guessing he's The Sol developers have created some sort of wrapper of their own. Push Lua state. It's a shame I can't get it to highlight the arguments very easily. Then it jumps to some external code, and then we're back into still Sol stuff. Traits. Sol Lua state. Okay. This is why I thought debugging this would be an absolute nightmare. Add. Self size. Size is 0. So I'm just wondering what I'm looking for is sort of nulls and zeros just to see if there's a problem. It's interesting looking at how Sol is actually accessing things like the Lua state. I don't know what any of these things do, but I do start to sort of recognize the semantics of what it's trying to do. No, that's a mess. It goes quite deep, doesn't it? So I'm guessing this is the... No, this one here. This is the last sort of Sol specific bit. So value... Reference, don't know, V, don't know, self. Self is a standard vector. Yep, self is a standard vector. Pushback, value as V. Oh, so I wonder if it's actually that bit that's breaking. Crafts Dwarf 404. I'm just wondering. Oh, hello. I'm just wondering if it's this point of standard vector that's invalid, or the buffer it tries to write to. Would it be possible as the version? So we're having issues. C++20. Move back to C++17. Is the vector supposed to be empty? No, it's not supposed to be empty, and that's why I think we try to index it. Because if we go back to the actual Lua code, opened up a lot of files now. Hang on. We go back to the Lua code specifically. It's purely read-only at this point, so it should just be indexing this node, which is that link to the vector. And that, I mean, it's evident by the fact that when I print the size of that container, using hash node, it comes back with 0 rather than 2. So in all of the circumstances, it seems to be fine, but at some point it just loses that link. I've lost my code now. Where are we up to? Here. So at this point, self has become 0. So if we work backwards now, go back up. Self, value. The idea was to read from the location. Stateless stack reference. I mean, it gets very, very complicated, doesn't it? Hold on, does it crash at the indexing? You've called pushback from Lua. Indexing a vector shouldn't do that. Hang on, what does that mean? Hey, Slice. Does it crash at the indexing? Yeah, I think it does crash at the indexing. You've called pushback from Lua. Indexing a vector shouldn't do that. That's what I'm trying to understand here. I mean, I'm not entirely sure what it's doing at this point. Right? Maybe it's just got completely confused and lost. Yeah, you think indexing a vector would be fairly trivial. But don't forget, it's got to do that indexing through stack manipulations with Lua. So, I mean, we could be looking at a vector that's just there to exist for handling that stack manipulation. I think it crashes at pixel **** or whatever. Or does Sol add stuff to a vector, so indexing it out of bounds? Hang on, we've got sort of Twitch emojis all over the top of what you're saying. I have to look at it. That contains a valid value. Well, I think the fact that it does work at some point and then stops working makes me think, what actually changes? And that makes me more think perhaps we need to look at my code a bit more. Right? Am I at some point? We've just demonstrated as we step through. I've not sort of got rid of the nodes. The nodes are there. They exist. They're quite happy. Hey, it's an interesting one, and I don't think we're going to solve it tonight. I think it's going to require some real digging, and maybe reducing to some, like the most reduced form possible. It's a fiddly one. Oh, it's a fiddly because I'm not that familiar with how Sol works behind the scenes. Is it possible to get a recap? Yeah, what's happening is we have got a bug, and it's a bug that's really frustrating me because if we run the code, the following happens. If I draw a rectangle, it's quite happy. If I draw a second rectangle, it's quite happy. I've added features to select the vertices and move them around, but if I go back to the original rectangle and select the vertex to move it around, we crash out. Not always crash out, sometimes we just get sort of zero. So something bad's happening. And it's as if the Sol implementation of the Lua state machine is becoming somehow disconnected from the object. And I don't see how that's possible. Assign new val to val. Yeah, see, I don't know what this. I mean, it's so verbose. What's actually happening here? And other than being the developer of this library, I think actually sort of getting stuck into this is it's a challenge in its own right, to understand what's going on and follow it back through. Container became orphans. Wow, I mean we're digging right down into the bowels. There's something just going wrong with memory. So maybe that's the problem. Maybe I'm corrupting the heap somehow, and that's causing a problem. That's actually very likely, isn't it? Let's be honest. So let's go and have a look at my code again. I think that bit's probably just fine. So where would we be corrupting the heap? With this. It's possible if selected node is an invalid value, I suppose, but we've not seen that. Let's run it again to here, just to see what's going on. So rectangle and rectangle, and let's select this one, this shape. Let's select this shape and then this shape. Let's mix it up a bit. Right, so the shape selected is shape 1. That's fine. The selected node is node 1 of that shape. So this time it shouldn't be a problem at all, because it was the last shape drawn. Let's have a look. Yeah, no problem. It's happy with that. It's the last shape. It's happy to keep doing it with. So let's go back to my program again. And we'll rerun that debug there. Oh, still selected shape. Probably not going to be able to get out of this now because I'm debugging. So it's interesting that the last shape drawn is okay. Let's draw some more. Let's draw another shape in. So this one. Select it. Yeah, okay, I can pick it up. That's fine. If I go back to the second shape, select. Okay. So the most recent shape created, it's fine with. This makes me think that somewhere I've really only got one vector of these nodes. I'm programming some bugs. Using vectors, well, kind of, yeah, using vectors in a reasonably safe way. Are we sure we're passing in the right pointer for node when we jump back to the... Yeah, I've got no choice in the matter with that one. This is why it's a frustrating bug. If we just sort of all take a step back for a minute, the class shape has this vector of nodes, but this class also has, or supposedly has, its completely own unique instance of Lua. And so then we tie that nodes to that Lua. In fact, we do it twice now. So we do it here upon startup, node, so it's linked to nodes, and we do it here. Now, there is another option. Perhaps we don't send a reference. Right? What if we just force it to copy the nodes directly in? Don't like that. Let's see what happens. Why is it constructing stuff if you're only updating? Wait, because it's got to reconstruct the geometry. Because that's the purpose. It calls Lua to then go and recreate the geometry. Right, so let's try that now. So first rectangle, second rectangle. Let's go back to this first one. Select the shape. Select the point. Oh no, still doesn't like it. When you push back to a vector, it reallocates memory. And I know this. I don't think that's strictly the problem here. It could be. I don't know. At the moment, I'm trying to take sort of all things into account. The Lua script here, I think it's failing. Maybe this is the point. We need to start putting some more debug clauses into the Lua script. So it creates. There is a polygon vector called polygon out that is cleared at the start of this function being called. Then all we do is generate all of the geometry. In this case, it's a rectangle, so it's just adding 4 vertices to the screen. But in order to know where those vertices are, we look at the construction nodes, and there's only 2 nodes associated. Now, don't forget, this is Lua, so it's not indexing at 0. We shouldn't need to worry about that. Quite reliably, that has been correct so far. So that will actually index vector element 0. I think the program's crashing because we're corrupting some memory somewhere and Lua might not like it. It's very possible that as the... No, it's not very possible at all. If it's done sensibly, if you wrapped the vector, even if it changed size, right, there'd be no sort of pointer-based link from things in Lua. This is not accessing anything via pointers, right? This is going to go back through and use at, probably, to work out where things should be. Where do you create the output vector? The output vector is created just the once. There it is. Poly. I'm going to put this back to how it should be. So the output vector is created just the once. It's just a vector of... well, it is of type poly, and poly has some properties. So actually what I do is map the polygon into the Lua space. So if we actually have a look at the function, you see it's the verts property of polygon out that's being added, and the verts property of polygon out that's being cleared. Yeah, that's my frustration, Johnny. So I think that's why it's tricky, and I will just have to sort of build a reduced example and see if I can replicate the problem. It might be worth reaching out to the PhD and asking him what's going on here. Yeah, I don't think it does any sort of clever linkage with pointers going on. What happens if you select the first rect and then select the second one again? Does it still work? We can try. But I think what we can try and do now is add some more debug information to the Lua script just to see if we're getting it right. So, I just wanted, because I've noticed that a fair few viewers have turned up, just to sort of reinforce that this thing does actually work. You know, we can draw all sorts of different shapes, and these are like the new ones that I've been working on. Quite complicated constructions all happening in Lua. We've got quite a few now. I've forgotten what they all are and how they work. Oh, that was a nice one. Now, we saw that one last time, didn't we? But let's take, if I pick the star, that's the last shape I've just drawn. It's got this control point here, so I should be able to select it and move it. And you can see I can actually move it. It's working just fine for the last shape drawn. But if I go back to any of the previous shapes and try and move things, no, we crash out. Things start to go wrong. And if I look at the output, we've not even got any Lua output this time. It's crashed before Lua managed to fail. Which is nice, right, in a way, before we were getting some Lua error messages. Now we're just crashing out straight away, which tells me we're corrupting the heap, right? It's as simple as that. We're messing something up. I'm lost my own position now. Where am I? So the test we were going to do. What happens if we select the other rectangle? Let's try that. So draw a rectangle, select this one, and then go back to this one and edit it somehow. Fine, it's happy. Select this one again, go back to this one, edit it. It's as if those two nodes, the last two nodes, are the two that Lua is seeing, and it's quite happy to work with them. But when we go back to here, I think it's still somehow tied into what those nodes were, and it just falls apart. Difficult. Can you get any info on... are you using smart... Sorry, go back a little bit. Unless you're using smart pointers for the class. No, not using anything clever like that. Can you get any info where the Lua interpreter is currently at the moment of the crash? Well, I guess it's not running, right? Yes and no. We may have to add some commands. So in this case, it crashed. In this case, it crashed calling the function. You know, sometimes when we've been running this, it's actually got this far and said that the result's invalid. I don't think adding that one there has actually helped matters. So I'm going to take that out. At least we were getting errors from the Lua script. So if I try it again now, hopefully we've gone back to just getting Lua errors. Although that's interesting that putting something there. I like sort of debugging like this. Right, so there's first one, second one, move it. So there we go. So at least now it's the Lua function that's actually crashing. But what it's crashing with is this attempt to index a nil value, and we can see that the size of our nodes object according to Lua is 0, and it shouldn't be, it should be 2. So the Lua is legitimately failing because whatever Sol is asking C to do, it's not doing it. I guess print debugging in Lua. This time it was read access violations. Last time it was write access violations. Yeah, that's what I think we've just made up. Is the name Lua equals nodes? Well, exactly, right? So what's going on there? It's a fun one. It's a fun one. Don't know if we're going to get around to doing any splines tonight at this rate, but we'll see. I say add Lua 1, add Lua. Okay, so you want to really sort of get stuck in. We can break this down quite a bit. So we can put in 1 space ... Right, so that's our first one. Let's put in something right at the start up here. So we'll put that as a 0. That's being called. So we've done a manipulation. Let's just see if I can remember the syntax for concatenation in Lua. Make sure that it's right. Yeah. And then fine. And then this one. Move. Oh no, see this time it crashed. It crashed in C++ land. It's got to be bad memory. We've got to be making a mess of something. Interesting. Yeah. I like this sort of bugs. Starfree clone, hello, thank you. I appreciate that. And the node is not taking address of a temporary vector. Hey, yeah. Right, let's have a look. Let's make sure that that's not the case. So, Starfree clone, we think I've got a nasty bug somewhere, and we're struggling with it. So my node's vector is created directly, right? There's no pointer and magic, nothing going on. And when I'm creating the shape, again, that's just created inside a vector, somewhere else in the program. Now, in order to select the correct node, I created a function which was here, contains. That tells me, does the shape contain my mouse cursor? That was actually quite tricky to work out because the shapes behind the scenes are different types of standard GPU geometry models. So I need to know what type of model it is and then do the appropriate check using the Geometry 2D library, I should point out, to work out which particular shape am I hovering over. But none of these edit the shape in any way, so I don't think that's too bad. When I'm linking, I have this initialize function. This is called once at the start. It's not called by the constructor. In fact, there isn't really a constructor for this. But it is called by the program when a new shape is created. That causes the linkage. So here we are linking Lua, linking the libraries, adding in these types. And these are compound types, so we can have this sort of sophisticated nesting of types within the Lua script. And that seems to be working fine. Then we run the script. We only need to run that once because that loads it all up and gets it ready. Nodes is either cleared, depending on what the script tells it to do, it's either cleared or it's resized to a particular size. And so far, I like to think that's all working just fine. But here, I mean, is it something to do with the try and catch? Is that catching me out here? Is that doing something clever behind the scenes? Well, see, I must confess, I don't know the mechanics of exceptions behind the scenes, so whether that would be a problem. Yeah, it's good to see you here, Starfleet Clone. So we've got two conflicting opinions here. Don't you think the try and the catch is doing anything particularly smart? It's worth a try, though, isn't it? Yeah, I don't need it technically here in update polygon, because update polygon is a member function of this class, and so I've already set it once. And that's what I fear is the problem. If we've set it once here, and then I've gone to create another shape, is it that one that's then set? And that's why nothing's quite working. Is Sol doing something very clever, but getting all the names of things mixed up? Let's try running that without the try and the catch. I'm surprised it does run. Let's have a look. So rectangle, rectangle, and then we select the first rectangle, move a point. This time it's a crash in Lua. We can see actually with looking at the, you can't see, if I bring it here, zeros, it's getting through stage 0, it's getting through stage 1, so I think we want to put in some more checks. I don't think removing the try and the catch, changing the error message has really solved anything, because I think this is a memory corruption problem. Try catch doesn't modify the happy path. All right, we'll put those back in. I mean, that's probably why we didn't catch the exception, right? By taking that out, we just allowed. Oh well, no, because what was actually printing that error must have been here then. Yeah. Okay. Let's add some more checks in. We know it's been line 17. So it's just, well, because we've seen that the size of the node each time is 0. There's nothing to read. So it's trying to index it, and it's not there. And that's what the Lua message is telling me. I'm really stuck. Really stuck on this. Need a sol spurt. If the bug is somewhere in the container, you can try enabling iterator debugging to find if something is validated from under you. Does it work if you only have one polygon? Yeah, everything actually works really nicely. So keep doing this, because I appreciate people sort of dipping in and out. Just wait for it to compile. Proof of the pudding, and you'll like this, TGG, if you didn't sort of see these things before. This is my funky line, but it's a line that does sort of curved bits with 0 overdraw. Right? And if I zoom in, you can actually see it doing its thing. Now, let's say, for example, I select my shape, I go to a particular node, and I press the M key. Now, this is the last shape drawn. We can move it, and you see it's dynamically creating all the geometry, just as we expected it to. There's a glitch when you've got a line that overlaps another line, but functionally, that will work just fine for sort of stroking the outside of shapes. Right? Nice. Now, it doesn't matter whether it's rectangles or whatever. So if I now draw a second shape, rectangle. Now, this is interesting. Look, it's not actually letting me select the other shape. So this is why I think it's something bad in my code, right? There's another bug. this hovered shape is still considered the selected shape. Let's try it with some circles just to make sure it's not a problem. So circle and circle. If I go back to the original circle and move, no, same error. So it shouldn't really make any difference. Do you have safeties all on? If the bug is something that can try and enable iterator debug, you're going to have to show or shout out what that is. Let's get debugging. Let's just crash out somewhere and get debugging up and running. All right. Iterator debugging. Where am I looking at for iterator? Is that something built into Visual Studio? No, that sounds like a really ignorant question that I probably should know the answer to, and I bet you I do. It's just I know it as something else. Do I have all safeties on? Yes, sol all safeties on. Yep, that's included. Does it work if you only have one polygon? Yes, it does. We answered that one. Can you go to the part of the call start right before where the STL code starts? Yes, I can. We need to obviously make it crash, don't we? So let's do that. So rectangle, select the shape. Right, so the sol stuff happens here. And, you know, your guess is as good as mine at what some of these things really mean. So self, I mean, that looks bad for a start, right? I guess that's probably the problem. The size of whatever self is currently is undefined. It's a massive thing. Right, so but this is, that's why I think it's memory corruption. You need to set the macro value iterator debugging level to something like 2. Okay, let's go and do that then. Let's go and set our build properties, project properties. Is that just a nice little checkbox somewhere? And typing it in. Enable iterator debugging. Iterator. No, not in that one. Plus general. No. Language. No. Code generation. No. Debugging. No. All right, I'll just type that one in. So you need to set the macro value, iterator debugging, something like this. Is annoying. Every time you put your cursor over something in the Twitch chat, it puts these little icons over it. I can't even read what they are. Iterator debugging level. Let's try that. So we'll add that as a command. Iterator debugging level equals 2. Apply. Right. Oh, hang on. Duh. What is it? Dash D. Yeah. Is it dash D on Windows? I think it is, isn't it? View processor definitions. Let's add one in here. Equals 2. And let's get rid of the one I've added at the end. Get rid of you. Iterator debugging, huh? This is a secret Visual Studio hack. Is it possible the memory contents of an address might refer to change during the program? Yeah, I don't think there's no, we're not pointing to anything at anywhere in any part of this build. So, if I don't use pointers at all in this program, not sort of directly anyway. And when I'm actually indexing the right shapes and things, it's literally just integer indices into the vectors themselves. So there's nothing clever going on here at all. Looks like the states really are independent. Yeah, they should be. I mean, you have to have it like that. Vector reallocation makes its element. Yep. Yep. You're not wrong. Maybe it's a bug with the new mouse. My new mouse hasn't arrived yet. Don't get me started on the new mouse. That's caused me more problems than it. So iterator debugging, right? So let's crash it and let's try it with this iterator debugging then. So rectangle, go back to the first one. Okay, so this time it's failed in Lua, right? It's not actually failed in the C++. In fact, you can see the C++ program still runs quite happily because Lua and Sol is handling the error. It still allows me to move the node, but it can't reconstruct any geometry because it's saying there are no nodes. So I can actually move this node for select the shape. See, I can legitimately move it, but it can't recreate the geometry for that shape. So we can't make it crash this time. Let's try again. Nope. We may try moving this one again. This one should move, right? This is the most recent one. A little bit fiddly to pick up. So it's quite happy to do. The most recently created shape, it's happy with. An older shape. Let's try this node. Now this time it's just Lua crashing. So we've obviously... we closed the program. This is interesting. If we look at the output, is that going to tell me there is corruption around somewhere? No. Nothing like that. Way to delete, access violation. Everything just smells like making a mess of some memory. In fact, there's different error messages and stuff each time. Like the seasoned pros in the audience must be in agreement with me here that we're making a mess of. I'm doing something dumb, right? I must be invalidating a vector or indexing a vector that doesn't actually exist, and it kind of exists, but it's not fully there. Check N-shaped selected in range before index access. Yeah, well, we've done some debug runs where we did that as a check. So if I control an F10 to this location, I'm zooming in because it just makes it a bit easier to sort of select the nodes for checking. And then I go and move this node. Now we can see that selected shape has the value 0, and it's right, it was the first shape selected. My vector of shapes has 2 shapes in it. They're both there with the unique Lua machines. Lua is a unique pointer. I mean, that's a pointer that's been created by Sol. Not really much to look at in these things. State view. Guess we could look to see if these two values, are they actually the same? So this one is EB08 at the end. If we go have a look at one of the others. So this is shape 1, Lua, raw view. No, 948. So the two state machines are fundamentally different objects. The polygon exists. It's got 4 vertices, and it's got the nodes vector, the problematic vector exists. It's got 2. Its values are unique. The selected node is 1. There are 2 nodes, 0 and 1 in C++ land, so I think that seems to be fine. Where are you setting the content of nodes? So that happens... That is a bit scattershot, but that's done during the shape creation. So as I'm drawing the shape, so I have these functions here. So it all happens in one place. As I'm drawing the shape, I place a node. I get the shape at the... Now this is a bit suspicious. I get the shape at the back of the vector, because that's the most current one that I'm currently drawing. I empty that shapes. So I push back the cursor location. That's placing the construction nodes. There's a couple of different operating modes depending on whether there's an infinite number of nodes or not. But this update polygon isn't failing. That's the one that's creating the geometry. So that shape's quite happy. Yeah, maybe taking this out of this sort of syntax. Maybe there's something about this that's smelling a bit. There's your bug. I'm taking a reference to back. Well, only for the duration of this lambda function. I'm not actually storing that anywhere. The address of the node member changes as you add more. Vector on size 1. Address of the node member changes the node member. Well, no, the actual node member isn't. Its address isn't going to change, right? As I push back. Is it? You call pushback when you could invalidate it. Hang on. Look. Try not to take the references. Well, yeah, I don't want to just sort of copy the shape out of the vector. Hang on. Whoa. Twitch chat's like going a bit too fast now. Right. You're taking a reference to back. Yes. Firstly, what? Obviously, being dumb. Why is that a problem here? Right, so I'm just getting, I'm getting a reference just because it stops me having to do vex shapes dot back all the time whilst I'm working here, right? Exciting. It's good that the chat's getting stuck in. The address of the node member changes as you add more. MSV reallocates the vector size equals 1. All references in the Lua... Yeah, but the address of the node member shouldn't change, right? Because that's the object, right? That's the vector. Okay. Does vex shapes ever change during the lambda? No. No. It's purely it's a syntax. It's a quick hack, right? It's just to make it convenient for me to rather than typing the same thing all the time. No, it doesn't change during the content of the lambda. Nothing pushes to the back unless I start creating a new shape, and I can't create a new shape whilst I'm in the middle of placing nodes for an old one. Hang on. Maybe try not to take the reference and see if there's still an error. I've got a problem if I do that. See, that will then copy over, right, the back object, right? So an interesting error. Function declared cannot be referenced. It is a deleted function because it doesn't have a constructor, I think. I'm going to put that back. Does vex shapes? No, we read that one. That's not the issue. If you push back into vex shapes, you invalidate all references in Lua from existing vex shapes on allocation. Ah, hang on. I think it's just clicked. Okay. Right. Yes. Sorry. You're thinking the next level up. We're not thinking specifically about the nodes vector being a member. Right. Okay. Yes. That's probably it then, isn't it? Yes. I think you're right. That's a nasty one. Isn't that a nasty one? So to avoid doing that, I then need to basically reconstruct. Well, we did that, right? So that's what we were doing when, because I thought we were doing something a bit similar to that when we actually redo the reference, when we were putting it here in the update polygon function, when we were reassigning it, right? So this can be called at all sorts of places. Reassigning it here should just put it all back to normal, right? Because this moves around with the C++ object. That's not a problem. Yeah, maybe. I'm not so sure. Change it to standard list. Well, again, the globals are not the well, okay. So maybe if we put both in here. So basically what you're saying is, I'm not so sure about this, right? Because these are relative to this parent object, right? So, okay, I guess the parent object could move. And if, okay, maybe actually, will that actually change? Yeah, I don't think that will actually change things. The chat's getting dead excited. It takes me a while to catch up with it. Coding Joker, hello. Yes, we're having a fun one tonight. Active shape, whatever. So, right, we get some saying. Use the active shape. Don't use back. Change it to standard list. Change it to standard queue or deck. I'm guessing that should be. I don't know why you keep getting all these little stars popping up in your stuff. Iterators are stable on pushback there. Swap, pop, pop, or slot map, or double pop. Globals are invalid. Okay, let's yeah, the easy way out then is let's do it to something that's stable, which you're right is a deck, right? So let's yank a deck in here. I call it a deck. It's double-ended queue, whatever. I don't know what the right way to call it is. So we're going to change our vector of shapes to a deck of shapes. There we go. Deck. We may have to do a little bit of fudging about it. This doesn't actually solve the problem, but let's. The problem is there's a design error here, right? In my design, but let's see if we can sort of help it out a little bit. Come on, Visual Studio, give me some red squigglies, please. Oh, nice. The first thing we want to do is if we can make sure that this works, I do want to take out the sort of our safety realignment. So let's just take those out. All right. So changing to a deck, nothing fundamentally changed. That's nice. Good old standard condition. So let's see what happens. I think I'm on the same wavelength here as Standard Int and Starfreak. I think I understand what the problem is. So hopefully everything should still work. But let's have a look. So rectangle, select the first one. Oh, there we go, you see? Yep. So, naughty. Invalid references proving to be problematic. Let me draw a nice shape to put a nice border around all of this. Right, and so we should be able to now select sort of any shape. Yep. Select this one, and see the selection of shapes isn't freezing either. So actually all of the sort of interaction logic is working just fine. But I've still got a bit of a design issue then. I have no problem using a deck, but I think I just need to be a bit more careful with how I construct these shapes and the order of which I do things in. Can you explain what the issue was to the team? Right, I think we'll have a go. Let's find the... keep in mind, this was a vector. Right. When it was a vector, when we create, add something to the back of a vector, of course, a vector can reallocate. Now, in this case, it was coming up time and time again. Oh, if you reallocate vectors, pointers and things break. That's very true, but that's not directly what we're seeing here, but it is actually the problem. So as we were adding more shapes, this vector shape reallocated. Now, historically, what we'd done in the past is here, we'd linked Lua to some address relative to our object. But then when we reallocate that object, potentially it moves, not this object, but the parent object of this. And this is some offset to the parent object. But I'm guessing in Lua's space, it probably is just some number somewhere that's being cast to the appropriate thing. And so that's what was breaking. And so whenever I was trying to interact with it, after I'd added another shape, I was actually sort of interacting with memory that was potentially there sometimes, potentially not sometimes, and that's why we were seeing this sort of inconsistency. It's a bit more deceptive because we're not really using visibly pointers anywhere. That's a nasty error. It's a good fix though. Getter functions for the global right. So why did changing to a deck fix it? Well, a deck, you can push things into it. It doesn't reallocate it. That's why I've suggested basically change it to a list, right? Because for the time being, that's a simple way out of this. But it's not a nice fix. It means I need to think about how do I actually redesign the construction. The other thing is this is all mute, right? Because this is my little test demo. When we actually port it over to the editor, it will be a bit different. Yeah, I don't think we should have created a bigger vector. That would have just hidden the problem. Could you have done this with vector instead of passing object addresses? You could have dealt with object indices instead. I've got no. See what happens here, Magetsu. You can tell Magetsub's not watched the most recent channel video, right? What's happening here is I'm actually linking. Sol has linkages for standard vector directly in Lua. So Sol will go and wrap up the standard container in a really nice Lua interface. And when you access the vector via Lua, let's. I'll come back to this bit in a minute. We're definitely overrunning tonight. So it sort of adds in all of these additional functions and bits and pieces for manipulating that standard container. But if fundamentally that standard container isn't where Sol thought it was, then yes, it's going to be manipulating nothing at all. Or indeed other things, which is even worse. Now the idea is if I got rid of the reference there, the address of operator, then I'm basically just copying right into the Lua space. I'm setting something. I think so anyway. I'm not sure. Maybe we need to do some experiments with that. But I think the same problem would still occur because I think Sol sort of changes this into just a address somewhere. We'll need a Sol expert to go and work that one out. Yeah, standard int starfruit clone. Thank you very much. That was it's a good fix. That's good when we do this by the community, isn't it? Anyway, let me explain what this horrible file was. So I thought, wouldn't it be really cool? Before we click off this, let me just get rid of that. I thought it would be really cool to have a multi-segment line. And so the first time I created the line, you kind of want your lines to have some width. So I'm just going to set this to 0 in the Lua script here. A multi-segment line, let's say you wanted to stroke the border of some of the shapes or some of the geometry that you've been creating, which is not uncommon in sort of vector art packages. So let's, what is it, number 5. So if I click here, so it gives me a straight line, straight line, straight line, straight line, whatever. But I wanted to sort of maintain the width. So you can see that it doesn't sort of shrink and get smaller. It gives you this nice sort of pointy way out. And if we go and have a look at the geometry that's been created for that, you can see it's really simple. It's a strip of triangles created in the right order. And again, with no sort of overdraw, because you really don't want to overdraw if you're drawing things with a little bit of alpha or some sort of additive blending or something like that, because you get these sort of obvious artifacts, problematic artifacts. I'm not going to shut that down. I'm just going to go and change the script to corner type 1. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice if we radded those corners? Radded, as a mechanical engineer, means we're going to add some roundness to them. So we go back to our program, and if I draw a second shape, now this one might change shape actually inadvertently whilst we're doing this, because I've changed the script that belies it. So you can see now it's rounded around the corners instead, which is quite nice. So it gives you this cartoony sort of feel. Let's get some angles in there. Whatever. Yeah. And the geometry construction is much more complicated in order to support those rads. Of course, they are segmented, but you get to a point where it's not really too much of a problem. And if it is a problem, then you can just throw more triangles at the solution. But again, had to create a strip which didn't feature any overdraw. And so you can see that the rads are actually non-trivial computations going on here. So even though there is a circle quite clearly at each knuckle in this line, the center point of that circle is actually some sort of intersection of the sides. And so calculating that was a problem. Now, for those of us that like bendy drinking straws, and this should work now because we've just fixed it, we can start to sort of move these around, and you can see that the geometry is being constructed dynamically. So this is Lua doing its thing via Sol very nicely. Particularly if we look at that joint there as I move this one around, we can see it creating more and more segments as necessary to maintain that roundness. And this became a little bit of an addiction for me because I found it quite satisfying working out how to triangulate all of these different shapes in an optimal way, but also in sort of a triangular optimal way too. Let me just deposit that there. So hopefully I should be able to move this one around. Yep, this one stays jaggy. So this is what I was saying about the Lua state machines being completely exclusive, right? So we've got, even though you've just seen me change the script file, once it's loaded, that's how the shape is drawn and computed at that point. But what I was surprised with was just how complicated the Lua script needed to be in order to do this, and this one to some extent. And because I'm me and I'm never satisfied with just the simplest solution all the time, I've added sort of scope to add line ends and rounding and arrows and that sort of thing too. So let me have a quick glance at some of the chats. I think member pointers is probably something Sol can handle because it does use it in other places. ECS, I'm not an ECS fan. Been there, done that. Nah, not for me. You're already passing just a pointer into Sol. Oh, sorry, I'm reading that out of context. So now if I go and have a look at this Lua script file, why is it so complicated? Well, firstly, Lua doesn't have very much in it. It doesn't even have like the hypot function, so you needed to create that. Then I realized I'm using the cross product quite a bit, so I needed to do that. And what was nice, I was actually stealing all of these from the Geometry 2D library that the community have gone away and created. In fact, I think I'm going to wrap that library in its entirety for Lua, so we can have a nice Lua interface to it with C implemented or C++ implemented backend, so it'll be nice and quick to go away and do all of these functions, because I think for a lot of these geometry functions you do need these sort of intersections. So here we've got intersect line, which uses some of the functions we've just created, and you'll see it also works in the vector 2D type, which I could do with adding a few more functions to make life a bit easier. But we'll get to the construct polygon function. These ultimately are parameters which will be externalized. So right now we have to hard code them, but you've seen, well, some of you will have seen in a previous episode where the editor had sort of user configurable properties. These will be populated in that sort of in way. In Lua, you can have functions inside functions as well. So I've created two convenience functions here, which is add a it doesn't have sort of it can't really work out a function being overloaded by its arguments, unfortunately. Maybe it's a limitation of Lua. Maybe I don't understand the right syntax to do that. But so I had to create two functions, one which added a vertex to the output, and one which added a vertex specified as an x and y coordinate. Then I'll go through all of my control nodes. If I'm at the start of a line, I need to do this. If I'm at the end of a line, I need to do this. And then get the fun bit, what I called the knuckle. So for the knuckle, I need to work out properties of the segment to both the left and right of the knuckle. And then I need to work out the boundaries of those segments in space and work out where they're intersecting. And then, yes, if the corner type is just linear, that's easier to work with. But if it's radded, then I need to go and work out if I need to work out which way is the knuckle bending first, and depending on whether it's bending left or right, I draw a circle going clockwise or I draw a circle going anti-clockwise to create those segments, because I have to keep them all in the right order for the strip construction of the GPU data type. Right, so it turned out to be quite an involved exercise, but a lot of fun. Thank you, Johnny G. Especially, you mean watching me suffer in real time. So let's have a quick look. Standard, do you know how large the call overhead is from Lua into C++? No, I don't. I don't know. Honestly, is the answer. Not much. that's how Lua should be intended to work. So when you use a lot of the Lua basic libraries, there are already pre-compiled libraries that are linked in. It's not high, but I guess it also depends on how the nature of the arguments are that you're passing between the two as well. If you're passing things like tables backwards and forwards, I guess that gets a little bit more complicated. Sol also adds a layer of abstraction on top of all this, so you must be paying some sort of performance for the convenience of Sol. But as we can see, right, Lua's no slouch, right? It's running here quite a lot of calculations in order to generate that geometry live, and we can see it does start to suffer. Now I'm running in debug mode. Let me just zoom in a bit so we've got a sort of a consistent screen. I don't know if you can see the frame rates on there, so I'll read them out. But that's now about 270 frames per second. It's slow because it's got to draw lots of lines, which is not something that GPUs are particularly good at doing. I think you're right, Standard. I don't think it does have a huge overhead, but I must have some, right? Now, if I start placing lines, let's watch what happens. So I'm going to start drawing my line. No problem at all. We've gone down to about 240. And as I add more control nodes, we can see that the frames per second does start to drop quite significantly. Right, so with that many control nodes, now remember that's quite a lot of geometry going on there now. We're down to 39 frames per second. Now you might think, oh, that's because it's got to draw all of this extra stuff. Well, don't forget, it is dynamically creating these objects every single time I move. So as I move this around, it's recreating the entire geometry structure. Yeah, I know there's a glitch when we get two lines lined up. Not too fussed about that. So I'm sort of hammering this really hard now. Here we go. And you can see we're down to 16 frames per second. We're in debug mode, by the way. 16 frames per second. I think that's probably enough. 10 frames per second. Now, if I place the last node, we've got all this geometry rendering. We go right back up to 220 frames per second. It's 210 because it doesn't really have a problem rendering this shape. It's got to render something. There's a lot of polygons being there. Lua is not involved now, of course. Right? This is purely just Pixel Game Engine doing its thing. So yes, certainly Lua does have a significant overhead to call, and that's why I'm sort of sparingly calling it rather than all the time. I also don't necessarily think that this would be a sensible construction. Let's try it in release mode. I must confess that's something I've not tried. Give it a go. Let's have a look. You need some SIMD. SIMD Lua. Well, the other option, because there are things like Lua JIT. Now, I've no personal experience of Lua JIT, but I believe Sol can work with it. Right, so this is in release mode. Now, hopefully, maybe Sol has got a bit smart and detected I'm in release mode. So about the same level of zoom there. So you can see straight away there's a significant difference in PGE doing its thing, 1200 frames per second. Let's have a crack at adding some stuff. And you can see straight away, we're starting to really lose frame rate. So now we're about where we were before. You can do cool stuff whilst I'm editing, by the way. You can do all this panning and zooming whilst you're doing the editing, which I quite like. Give us some more space. Now, at this point, if your user-created geometry has become this complicated, you're probably not using the right tool for the job. That's at least how I'm going to sell it. Oh, come back. Oh, we'll leave that one there. Why not? A bit funny. Right, so we're down to about 90 frames per second now. Let's get it down to 10. Click, 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 click. Let's go over here again, a bit more space. And it's also trying to render all of these cells in the background. So I think this is probably good enough. I'm sure somebody will find a use case where this isn't suitable. Let's keep going. I want to get it down to about, my finger's getting sore. So I'm going to stop it there. Right, so we got quite a complicated shape drawn. And if I zoom in, you can see it is quite a complicated geometry. Hey, I'll tell you what though, my mouse detection stuff works a treat. Right? It really does only select the shape when the mouse is over it. Right? And think of this really complicated shape. Right? It's only when you're actually over the geometry does it do the selection. Now I should be able to select any of this. Frame rate should start to drop as soon as I move this component. Yep, there we go, back down to 40 frames a second, because now we're dynamically recreating all of the geometry again. Very nice. Let's put in a star. Ta-da! There we go. That's a star for Starfleet clone, and here's a star for standard int for pointing me in the right direction today with the bug that I was having. So we didn't actually get to any splines. Did you remove that one iterator debugging define? No, not yet. One grid. The grid could be one draw call. It's not that typical making the grid a single draw call. Firstly, right, the first problem you've got is, yes, like this, I agree with you, that's quite easy to do, but my grid is zoom independent, but also rotation and zoom independent. So there is, and it's only drawing what can be seen. That's non-trivial, right, to start up. So I think in shaders and things, yeah, there are some hacks and things you can make that happen. But it's a genuinely sort of 1 pixel wide grid that only draws what needs to happen. And in my application, having a grid like this is just never going to happen. That's not a problem. Most of the operations will be on a grid like this. So I'm not too fussed about that. Good night, Johnny G. Thanks for popping along. Some statistics would be interesting. I think you're right. I think probably start needing to profile how this works. I think it's quite nice, that collision detection. See, I made it highlight the geometry because if I try another one, so let's draw this one. Right, so this is the fan, right? So this is the fan type. Let's just close that off. I highlight that. Yeah, I can't draw the individual triangles, which is a bit of a shame. You can't sort of see what's going on. But I should be able to edit them now. Yes, good. Editing feature up and running. Getting to the point where I'm going to have to start like crediting standard int for some of the contributions to this. Right. Okay, I have definitely overrun tonight, so I am going to say thank you to those who dropped a quick resub and a new sub. Thank you very much. You've seen sort of the crazy chaos. I think next time we're going to carry on with splines, because obviously once we've got this far, sort of going over to a spline to give us nice curves is actually a fairly trivial thing to do. I thought that would make a nice stream, but no, watching me suffer live seemed to be what people really wanted to see tonight. So thank you. With my tooth pain, I've now got humiliation pain as well. And on that note, I'll see you all next time. Take care, everybody.